The rest stop, my guest, Omar Billy, former defensive tackle, Georgia Tech, former teammate of mine 20 plus years ago at Colonial High School in Orlando, Florida, football teammates, catching up. Omar, tell me, you talked about some of the stuff you're doing now in business. I saw something you posted about leadership. Tell me your transition now. You're a father, you're a husband, you still stay very active. First, I'm going to want to make it in two parts. Tell me about the balance of selfishness and selflessness at this point in time with those titles attached to who you are as a human.
Yeah.
And now where you're at as a business person and what your goals are short term for what you're doing now. So I know it's kind of long-winded, but I want you to encapsulate all of those in your answer.
Okay. With the selfish, I believe that there's a as a family person, right? And this is useful for people who don't have a family yet. You have to fill your cup before you pour into others, right? So anything that you can't pour from an empty cup. So that's leadership in business. That's loving on your family. That's loving on whoever. That's giving to your hobbies or your interests. You can't pour from an empty cup. So that means that you've got to fill your cup first before you can give away. So something that I'm mindful with is I want to fill my cup so I can give the people close to me as much impact and as much juice and as much fire as I can, because I feel like that's what's going to that's going to bring them the most value. Okay. And that's essentially what we want from our interactions, whether people can, understand that they want value from their interactions, whether it's a warm feeling, whether it's actual information like that they can learn from. It's value, whether it's entertainment. Like there's a value component to entertainment, right? If that's not the case, then Netflix wouldn't be what it is, right? Movie, Marvel wouldn't have all these movies that are, like there's a value component to all of these things. Well, if I'm going to bring value to my family, to my friends, to the people that I work with in business, I've got to acquire what's going to be distributed, right? So in regards to, my mindset, I make it a practice to read Proverbs every day, a daily proverb, right? Something from the Bible. Even if it's only a few minutes, I read something that is from Proverbs because it's wisdom. It's the foundation of wisdom, if you ask me, and I'm a believer. I also read things that are leadership transcends sports, business. As a matter of fact, the same things that you're using in sports, you're going to use in business. Well, you're going to use the same things in your household as well when you're leading your kids or you're leading your spouse, right? Or you're leading your friends to make good decisions. Because if you're a good friend, you're going to help them make good decisions, right? If you love people, that's what you do. Well, like text and people who have led before help me figure that out. So I choose to read it. I choose to figure it out. I choose to fill my cup with this information so that I can give when that time is necessary and give the value that I feel that people would want from me. You know what I mean? And that's so part of being selfish is budgeting the time to do so. So I usually train or I usually lift or whatever and read and meditate and pray before my kids wake up, because kids will distract you. You know what I mean? And if they're up, I actually go, there's a, Christians know of the this is symbolic, going into your prayer closet. Well, I actually go into my closet and pray because there's no light, there's no sound, there's very little that comes in. And that's where I feel like I have the best connection when I pray. Now I pray when I'm on the highway, I say, but the intention, the focus is not the same level that it is in complete silence, for me. And I choose to do that before my kids wake up. So I believe there's a bit of selfishness that is going to produce the right kind of selflessness that is necessary for me to bring value to the people in my life. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Omar, Talk about what you're doing now. What you're doing now with business. Is it one thing you're focused on? Do you have a handful of things you're working on? Tell us what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I've got a few things that I'm working on. My primary source of income is I work in the financial services industry with insurance. And at this point in my career, it's mostly about leadership. It's mostly about helping people to become better versions of themselves in their business lives. And I'll say, man, listen, I am blessed to be in the position that I'm in. As a matter of fact, one of my teammates is who introduced me to the business. One of my college teammates, another guy who was in my wedding, another guy that I actually helped host on his visit. You know what I mean? Is a guy that put me on to this position down the line. So these relationships go for years and years and years. I was the best man in his wedding. This guy was a junior Olympian. Like it's so crazy how this goes back to when we're talking about competitors and when you get to school. Well, this guy was a junior Olympian. If he chose to focus on track and not football, he would have gone to the Olympics. Like he was on the same junior Olympics team as like Allison Felix and a lot of these other people who like were phenomenal. You know what I mean? And he was the same caliber. But just to reference what we're talking about before, when you get on a college campus, like Colonial didn't have guys like that. You know what I mean? And hell, Orlando didn't. Like not the year I was coming out. So that's what I do in business. It's business leadership right now. I have an entrepreneurial spirit. There are some things that I have intentions on working on the side. I've got a few LLCs, and I listen with business. One of my fraternity brothers said something to me that really stuck. He said, "Nothing ventured, nothing gained." Right. So with these things that I'm dabbling in and that I'm choosing to pursue, I appreciate the venture part of it, like learning and, like the creating new relationships and stuff like that. Of course, in our hearts, we want every business or everything that we touch to be a home run. Mm-hmm. But man, there's base hits in this. There's strikeouts. There are these things. And going back to our story about Colonial, you've got to be resilient enough to take those in business, in whatever venture it is. Hell, you've seen the things I'm doing that will hopefully become a podcast one day. You know what I mean? Like, but maybe I don't become the Joe Rogan podcast. You know what I mean? But like, I've gotten my, I've taken the venture and I'm enjoying it and it's fun. You know what I mean? So that's where I am in business altogether, and some personal projects as well. I believe in the value of, of being a well-rounded human. You know what I mean? Because I've seen people who, who are immersed enough not to gain. It doesn't appear that they value other things in their life the same way that I do. That makes sense for me and my family. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Wrapping it up with Omar Billy. Omar, you mentioned what you talked about, potential podcasting in your future.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I really loved about one of the videos I saw. You've got your home gym in there, and then you had a couple guys. It's like you get a lift in and then have a little conversation afterwards. Yeah. I know you're probably way ahead of me on this, but I saw in my mind the lift with Omar Billy. Get a lift session in, have a conversation just like LeBron does at the barbershop or how we do it. That was really cool. Is that something that you kind of want to put together, or you're probably way ahead of me with the thought process there?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Again, blessed to say I've met some really interesting people in my time. Some really, really cool people, some really successful people, some really good people. And those things are not all the same. Like how we qualify success is not always what we qualify as good and wealthy. And, those things don't always overlap. So sometimes they do. And I'm really fortunate to say that, man, along my path, in my 30-something years, some of the people that I've created relationships with, that have created relationships with me, have been really good people, really successful people, really happy people, really mindful, present, some really what we would deem as success financially, and in terms of like, just in business and in whatever it is they're doing. How many people can say that they really know a Hall of Famer? How many people can say that they know, X, Y, and Z? And that's not something that I went to Georgia Tech to do. That wasn't it. It was just the network that I was blessed enough to be a part of. You know what I mean? And well, just like that, there's Calvin. There's other guys that that I'm relatively close with that have done amazing things. And I think it's just really cool that I've been able to have access to them, and they've been able to contribute to my life, to contribute to my story. I've got memories with some of these guys that, I don't want to sound tacky or anything, but they've contributed to my journey, and I think it's really cool. I'm really grateful for it.
I think it's cool too, Omar, and I think a lot of us, including yourself, myself, other guys that we know from our past, present, and future, I think this pandemic, and still kind of being at the midst of it, some would say the tail end, have really given a lot of people, including myself, a really large landscape to reflect on what our next step is, because there's so much uncertainty in the American landscape financially, and sometimes personally and spiritually. I mean, a lot of places of worship, when you talk about belief systems, have been put on hold, are starting to get back together. And it's really given a lot of human beings in this country an opportunity to kind of put the pieces of their next step aligned differently than what they expected it to be before.
Yeah.
And I think this podcast for me has been a great opportunity to release some of my anxiety and fear I've had about reconnecting with people based on fear of rejection. Is something I don't care about anymore. And you talked about some of the things that God has put on your heart and your life that's allowed you to flourish. That's something that I've prayed about. That for me, my personal belief system has allowed me to encompass is just a joy in the journey, in the process, without any recollection of the consequences of fear or anything that's really not that important. What's the worst that's going to say to me if I reach out to them is no. So that's just a small thing, but I see so many bigger things in the landscape and future for a lot of us, past, present, and future, a lot of guys that we went to school with. I'm excited with this podcast, The Rest Stop, to connect with people that were a part of my past, people I played with, people I just knew. And the thing is this is my podcast. I can do what I want with it. And whether the name recognition is there or not, there's people that are going to be blossoming out of what this pandemic has produced in tenfold. We may not know who they are now, but it's just a matter of time before we do. I think you're one of those people. I'm excited to talk with you. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to doing it again with you real soon. Thank you, Omar.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.